In this lesson, let's go ahead and create a custom HTTP handler. Now, I just want to start off by saying that in a lot of development environments, creating a custom HTTP handler might actually be a pretty rare occurrence. This is because robust frameworks like MVC have many features that allow you to do almost anything you could do in a custom handler. The common uses for building your own handler might include customizing the behavior of existing frameworks, such as changing how requests for certain file extensions are handled, or custom logic based on other factors like MIME types. Another reason to implement a custom HTTP handler is if you're building your own framework of sorts. For example, SignalR is a relatively new framework, but it still implements an HTTP handler of its own. Handling file and MIME types or starting a new framework are beyond the scope of this course, so we're just going to build a simple handler. The main concept that I just want to illustrate is that requests that are intercepted by our custom handler will not be executed by the MVC handler, which means the MVC framework will not generate the response for that request. Let's see how this works. First, let's add a new folder to our project, and we can call that handlers. Next, let's right-click on that folder and choose to add a new class. So in the dialog that comes up, we can call that class sample handler and just choose to create that. After Visual Studio adds that for us, let's turn our attention inside the class. Now first off, we want to make sure that our sample handler implements the iHttp handler interface. So let's add that after our class name here. And we can use the shortcut Control-P to have Visual Studio implement that for us. Now you can see the two members we discussed earlier here. For now, let's just set the isReusable to return false. That option isn't all that important to us right now. The process request method will contain the code that actually generates our response. This is what we want to focus on. Let's just add something simple in here so we know our response was generated by this handler. So I'll just type out context.response.write, and then let's just add a line of HTML in here. Also notice that the context object is passed into our method, and this is a good example of a resource provided by the larger ASP.NET pipeline. Next, we need to register our handler with the application. We can do this either through code or using the web config. I'm going to use code so that we can compare it to how our MVC handler is configured. To accomplish this, let's head over to our route config file where we define all the routes for our application. You can see the default route for our MVC app is still there. Let's add a more specific route above this code so that it will always be triggered first if it matches. I'll just add the code for that in here quick. And here we're registering that new route, but you'll notice our route also needs this sample route handler that I've defined. Remember, any route we add needs to have an associated route handler, just like how MVC uses the MVC route handler. So I'll add in a small class inside this file that implements the iRouteHandler interface. This interface just defines one method, which is called getHttpHandler. And inside this method, let's have it return a new instance of our sample handler that we created. Route handlers are just nice because they allow another layer of abstraction when selecting a handler. So now let's add a few breakpoints so we can keep track of what's happening. Back in our sample handler, I'll add one inside of our process request method so we can tell when that's hit. And we also want to add two more inside our controller. Our handler is set up to intercept any requests to the About page, so this first breakpoint should never actually be hit. However, if we request the contact page, the MVC framework should still be executed and we should hit this breakpoint. Let's go ahead and run the application and just see what happens. After the home page loads, I'll click on the link to go to our About page. Just like we expected, we end up hitting our sample handler. If I hit continue, the page will load and the breakpoint in our MVC controller was never hit. The MVC handler was never selected or executed, so that framework was never reached. Now if I go up to the address bar and just request the contact page directly, if I hit enter, you'll see that we do hit the breakpoint in our controller like we usually would. This is because the URL did not match the path that we defined for our sample handler route, so it was skipped during the matching process. So as you can see, HTTP handlers are what generate the response to the browser, and only one can run for every request. When a URL is requested, whatever route matches that request first will have its associated handler execute. In the next lesson, let's look at how this process differs from HTTP modules.